Hello, hello. We are back. And I'm excited about this lesson because this lesson sets up the main idea for the whole Sizzle Kids course. For this whole first course about what food is and what food isn't. So, here, what we're going to learn is where food actually comes from. And where it comes from, simply put, is it comes from plants and it comes from animals. And at its very core, at the very lowest level, that's where every single bit of food that you eat comes from. Now, we're excluding food that's made strictly from chemicals. We're going to talk about that later. But what I want you to start to think about is a line. And at one side of the line are your plants and your animals. And at the other side of the line are chemically processed foods. Okay. So, what we're going to talk about in depth now is our plants and our animals and where food comes from. And we're going to go way back to the beginning of how food is grown, how food is raised, all kinds of fun topics. So stick with me. This is going to be really fun. I've broken it down into lots of little lessons with fun topics. So we're making a big jump from where we were in the last module, which was big food, fast food, and junk food. And the reason I wanted to start there is because that's where a lot of us are. And that's where modern food industry is. A lot of us know what those things are. And, we're thinking about trying to be healthier and trying to get back to our roots and where our food comes from and eating more whole foods and less processed foods. And that's the big thing, less processed foods, more whole foods. And that's what I really want you to start thinking about. So instead of just saying, oh, yes, we need to eat more whole foods, less processed foods, I want you kiddos to really start to get the idea of what that means and where those whole foods come from. So here we are. We're going to start with plants and animals. Real food comes from plants and animals. It either grows out of the beautiful earth, out of nature. You've all seen apple trees growing, and you can pick an apple right off the tree and eat it. You can pull a carrot right out of the ground. You can take a blueberry off a bush and just eat it raw, eat it plain, no cooking necessary, no chopping, no anything. We're going to get into cooking in another whole course here at Sizzle Kids, but right now, I really want you to have this base knowledge of where your food comes from because that will influence what kind of foods you pick to eat, what kind of foods you pick to cook, how you feed your families, how you feed yourself. And you'll just get a big idea of where your food comes from and what kind of food you want to eat. So, in this lesson, this is just kind of an overview. We're going to talk about three places where your food comes from. And in this slide, you'll see that food comes from plants and animals first. Second, after that, on the line that we talked about, second, there's three different types of places in the wild that food is grown or raised. And the first one here on the top, if you can see here, is the wild itself. Super easy, right? The wild. It comes from the wild. You have here we're looking at wild turkeys, wild wheat that's growing, wild salmon that's swimming in the river there or in the lake, and it comes straight from the wild. I think we all understand that. Later on, we're going to learn about hunter-gatherer societies and all these types of interesting things and where our food came from, back thousands of years ago and where we are now with it. So, the first place it comes from, guys, is the wild. It just comes straight from the wild. You can go out into the wild, you can hunt an animal and cook its meat, use its milk, all kinds of different things. You can pick wheat, you can pick berries, you can pick fruits and vegetables, eat them raw, cook them up. You can go straight out into the wild, fish in a lake or the ocean or a pond or a stream for fish or shellfish, all kinds of different seafood. So the wild, first place. All right, second place is small family farms, ranches, and local ponds. Now, Back thousands of years ago, and we're not going to get into the history too much, but I do want you to understand that at a certain point in history, industrial farming, or just farming in general, started to come about. We had, irrigation was discovered, created, however you want to think about it. Societies started to have irrigation, and they started to have agricultural farming. And so we have the advent of family farms. We'll talk later about homesteading and backyard farms, and we'll get into real nitty gritty about farms and backyard farms, big farms, small farms, everything. But that's the second stage. After the wild, we started to have farms and ranches. Uh, After that, and where we are now with a lot of this food production, is we have industrial farms, ranches, and fisheries. So, on industrial farms is where you grow your mass produced fruits and vegetables. Huge operations. What they're called in the food industry is big agriculture. Big, huge swaths of land, hundreds and hundreds of acres, growing just wheat or just soybeans. And then they're harvested and they're made into all the different foods that we find in our grocery stores. In the same way, we have huge ranches, big feedlots where we have thousands and thousands of cows. You can see a picture of that here with all these cows here on this ranch being fed, being milked, and being used for meat. And then we also have huge chicken farms, huge pig farms, all kinds of different big, huge industrial, big agriculture, big beef, big chicken farms that mass produce all these kinds of foods for us. We also have huge fisheries. I especially want you to take a look at the picture here in the, what is it, the left hand corner here of this huge fishery. Now, this is a natural body of water, and a fishery has been built on top of it to farm the fish. And while it is a natural body of water, the fish in it are farmed. So they're bred to procreate and to lay eggs and produce more and more and more fish, specifically raised for mass production of and selling of fish. So where I want you to see we're coming from is from the wild to farming to industrial farming. Okay, from the wild to farming to industrial farming. Here, I want to talk to you just a little bit about the wild. The wild is what it sounds like. It's back thousands of years ago. We had hunter gatherer societies where the only types of food that they had was what they found in the wild. We had societies that were nomadic. And what that means is they traveled from place to place according to where the food was. And so they would forage around their area for wild berries, wild nuts. They would collect anything that grew, any kind of plants and uh, vegetables that were edible, and they were very knowledgeable about what was good for you, what was poisonous, and they ate what they found. One good example of of something that is edible and not edible is mushrooms. Mushrooms, some are very good for you, and some are very edible, and some are very, very poisonous. And these societies back thousands of years ago, they knew which ones were edible and which ones were poisonous. And they would go out, gather the berries, gather the mushrooms, gather various plants, and eat them. The same thing with hunting. They would go out hunting for meat, for bison, for deer, for any kind of meat that they could find, for rabbit, for turkey, for quail, all of these types of things. And whatever they found is what they ate for that day or for that week or for that month. And so, what the wild provided is what they ate. And for many, many centuries, this is how all of humanity ate. We're going to go into a little bit more about um, hunter gatherer societies. I wanted to show you pictures of these, but since it was so long ago, we don't have any photographs. So here are some drawings of what hunter gatherer societies would look like. Up here in the right hand corner here, we have some people gathering berries. So they would go out with their baskets and gather berries. Over here on the other side, we have hunters. So we have hunters and gatherers, hunters and gatherers. So the hunters would go out, and in one of the pictures here, the entire clan there is hunting a woolly mammoth, an ancient type of elephant that would provide meat for a group of people for many months. It was a really big hunt, a really big deal. They worked together. They went out, and if they could hunt something this large, it would feed their clan for a very long time. Here on the bottom, we have some men hunting deer, and that would also feed the clan. So if there were animals around, that's what they ate. And if there were berries around, that's what they ate. If there were mushrooms around, that's what they ate. And when the food ran out, they would pick up their whole camp and they would move to another area where there was more food. So I want you to understand the concept of hunter gatherers and how that applies to you, and why that's important to you is because this is really the healthiest way to eat. Fresh from nature, fresh from hunting an animal, fresh from picking a berry or a piece of fruit or a vegetable off of a bush or a tree. Those kinds of foods are in their most natural forms, and this is the healthiest way to eat. Now, it's not practical for us in modern times to eat this way most of the time. But however, I want you to go back to that sliding scale, to that line where the closer your food is to nature and from coming from a plant or an animal, the healthier it's going to be. The more you process that food, the less healthy it's likely to become. Not always, but most of the time, that's a good rule to live by. And we're going to be going back to this concept over and over again in Sizzle Kids. So I really want you to understand this, that we start at the hunter gatherer societies back thousands of years ago. We start there with whole foods that come from the earth and animals that roam freely on the earth. So that's where we are here. We're going to go over the next place where you can get your food, which is from farming. And from hunter gatherer societies, people moved into farming, and they were able to grow a lot more food. They stopped moving around as much, and all of the farming practices that we have today started back in those times. So here we are. I want you to get a really good baseline idea of that. Just the simple idea that all of your food either comes from a plant or an animal. So when you go to the store or when you're choosing something to eat, I want you to think in your head, what animal does this come from? Or what plant does this come from? And does it look like the plant that grows out of the ground? Or does it look like a piece of meat that might come from an animal? Or does it look like something different? So we'll get into this in more detail. That is the baseline of what I want you to remember throughout all of Sizzle Kids is when we're talking about food, we're going to think about and we're going to go back to what animal does this come from or what plant does this come from? All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next lesson.